Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe. Today I'm going to be discussing House Baratheon's history. Like my House of Finwë in Thingol and the Elvish Houses videos of Kryn, I'm going to get into a bit of the history of this house. But as there's a lot of extraneous members, I'm only going to get into the direct line that leads to Robert Baratheon and his younger, lesser brothers. Now, I have to preface this by saying I'm a classic fantasy fan more than I am a Game of Thrones fan. So this will be my point of view on this. And hopefully it'll be as quiet and peaceful a video as the House of Finwë video was. In marked contrast to the stormy, often angry nature of the Baratheon house, whose tag phrase is "Ours is the Fury." Orys Baratheon was the first of the house, younger half-brother to Aegon Targaryen, married Argella Durrandon rather against her will, and fathered several children with her. Orys, some time after his marriage to Argella, would die after putting down the Vulture King Rebellion. His son, though, is not really recorded and has for a wife Monica Velaryon. They ended up fathering and mothering, in turn, Reginald Baratheon, whom we know very little about, fathered a son, in turn. That son was called Rhaegar Baratheon, and Rhaegar was one of the most forceful Baratheons of all times, was husband to the Queen Dowager, Alyssa Velaryon, who was widow of Aenys Targaryen. He was in some ways for a time the power behind the throne, until his stepson, in an act of teenage rebellion, took control of the state from him. But relations soon recovered. It was to suffer heartbreak as his beloved wife perished in childbirth, and he chose to save the child. His son was Boromund Baratheon, and Boromund and his sister Jocelyn Baratheon would favor Rhaenys Targaryen's claim to the throne, in marked contrast to his son later on. His son, though, was Borros Baratheon. Borros was one of the strongest and fiercest figures in the civil war of the Targaryens between Rhaenyra and Aegon, her younger half-brother. Borros is infamously illiterate and had a very short fuse. He died in battle at the end of the war and was briefly succeeded by his son. Details are scant. Lionel Baratheon is the next major Baratheon that we know of. He's nicknamed the Laughing Storm, and he would, in the end up enraged when Prince Duncan broke his betrothal for Jenny of Oldstones, with Lionel being the first to rebel against the Targaryens. His rebellion ended when he renounced his claim to the throne, which he had tried to push forward, when he was faced by Duncan the Tall, who beat him in a trial by battle. Lionel, however, got the compromise that Prince Duncan would renounce his own claim to the throne, and King Aegon agreed to betroth his youngest daughter, Princess Rhaelle Targaryen, to Lionel's heir, Ormond Baratheon. The next was Ormond Baratheon. Ormond Baratheon is father to Steffon Baratheon, and he would ultimately, for a time, become Hand of the King, and that's about it. He was succeeded in time by his son, Steffon Baratheon. Steffon Baratheon, in turn, was father, of course, to Robert Baratheon, Stannis Baratheon, and Renly Baratheon. A good friend of Aerys Targaryen and Tywin Lannister, he served during the reign of two kings, but was sent off to Essos on a pointless errand that didn't yield any results, only for him to die at sea, drowning, whilst him and his wife tried to swim futilely to the shore. He was succeeded by his young son, Robert Baratheon, whom was quite the womanizer. Robert Baratheon fell desperately in love with Lyanna Stark, who may or may not have been a bit of a jerk and led him on only to run off with Rhaegar Targaryen, or she may have been carried off by Rhaegar Targaryen by force. End result is more important than the actual decisions that were made in some ways. The next Baratheon to take note of is Stannis Baratheon, whom exhibits traits of religious mania and burns people alive later in life. Some of his successes involved taking the Iron Isles when he was not trained to be a mariner. As to Renly Baratheon, the showboat of the family, there's not much to say. He tried to lay claim to a crown and died by a shadow baby. What's notable, though, is that Robert is survived by several children, none of them being legitimate ones. Illegitimate children along the lines of Bella, Gendry, and Bara, who were peasant-born. He only knew 2 of his illegitimate children, both of whom had positive relations with him. Mia Stone, though she felt betrayed by her father's abandonment of her, as she now lives as a peasant girl working along the mountain in the Vale. Had she been acknowledged, she would be Mia Baratheon and would likely have the best claim to the throne after Edric Baratheon. As to Edric, he is in some ways the only legitimate surviving heir to the name Baratheon. Stannis has his daughter, who's terminally ill, and Renly was not survived by any children. Therefore, Edric is the only surviving male heir of the Baratheon family. And Edric is noted for having large ears, a temper like his father, and for idealizing said father. Frankly, it's in him that the last of the hopes of the House Baratheon lies with. As to what the future holds for him, unknown and not terribly important, as House Baratheon seems to have, in recent times in the books, become sidelined by others such as Daenerys Targaryen and Jon Snow. It's interesting to note that there are parallels between Edric Baratheon's story and Henry VII, or Henry Tudor, so that it would be interesting to note if whether or not he'll eventually lead a overthrow of one monarch or another and lay claim to the Iron Throne. But that's enough about the House Baratheon. Let me know in the comments whether you like this video or not. If you'd like to see more, feel free to smash that subscribe button as though you were Robert Baratheon, smashing Rhaegar Targaryen to pieces.